Begin with Julian Abele, born in 1881 and educated at the University of Pennsylvania before becoming a major designer in the office of Horace Trumbauer. Abele contributed to prestigious Philadelphia buildings including the Art Museum, Free Library, Irving Auditorium, and Union League Additions, yet public credit often went to the white architect who employed him. That gap is not an incidental footnote. It shows how professional recognition was structured by race even when black design intelligence shaped the city's most important spaces. Use the Broad Street Line as a lesson in legibility. Transit makes a city readable through lines, schedules, platforms, and stations. Architecture gives those systems silhouette, status, and public meaning. Look around Broad Street and ask whose labor made civic authority possible. Abele's story is not only about a hidden genius. It is about education, drafting, office practice, institutional access, and the long work of recovering evidence. The line itself also has an architectural history: tunnels, stations, signs, platforms, and transfers organize how millions experience Philadelphia. At this first stop, distinguish documented design from popular attribution, notice the people omitted from official stories, and follow how black presence is written into public space. Tindley Temple on South Broad Street is associated with Reverend Charles Albert Tindley, a self-taught preacher, composer, and major figure in the development of gospel music. Born to formerly enslaved parents, Tindley built a Philadelphia ministry in which worship, music, mutual aid, and public speech reinforced one another. A church like this is an infrastructure of sound. Its sanctuary must hold preaching, choir, congregational singing, funerals, meetings, and the daily work of care. Tindley's hymns translated struggle into collective language, helping worshippers name endurance, hope, and deliverance. The route follows the Broad Street Line because transit connects the church to the people who made its sound possible: workers, families, musicians, visitors, and neighbors. Listen to the street and imagine how a congregation's music could travel through open doors, rehearsals, recordings, and memory. Do not reduce Tindley to a single origin story for gospel. His legacy belongs to a broader black sacred and musical tradition shaped by many composers, singers, congregations, and listeners. If the church is active, respect worship and current visitor rules. This stop teaches that architecture is not only stone and ornament. It is also the room's ability to gather a people and let them hear themselves together. Brandywine Workshop and Archives is a black-lead printmaking and contemporary art institution founded in Philadelphia by Alan Edmonds in 1972. Printmaking makes an ideal companion to a transit route because prints circulate. An image can be designed in a studio, editioned, taught, exhibited, collected, and carried into many homes. Brandywine created the infrastructure for that movement through presses, studios, visiting artists, education, archives, and networks connecting Philadelphia to national and international art communities. Its history challenges the idea that black arts institutions only preserve the past. They also support experimentation, professional practice, and new forms of collaboration. Read the site as a working environment. Paper, ink, ventilation, light, cleaning, storage, and heavy equipment all shape what art can be made. The archive extends that work across time, preserving artists and projects that may not have received equal attention from mainstream museums. Ask who gets trained, who gets exhibited, and who decides what enters the record. On a Broad Street journey, the question is always movement. How do people and images travel, and what institutions make that travel possible? As you approach, keep the route moving. Brandywine Workshop is coming up. This black-lead printmaking institution shows how Philadelphia's art history depends on studios, archives, teaching, and distribution networks, not only on finished objects in museums. William Still was an abolitionist, businessman, writer, and leader of Philadelphia's Vigilance Committee. From an office near this route, he interviewed freedom seekers, arranged aid, recorded names and narratives, and helped people traveling through the Underground Railroad. His 1872 book preserved first-hand accounts that might otherwise have disappeared. Calling Still the father of the Underground Railroad honors his importance, but the movement was a network, not one man's invention. Freedom seekers made the decisions and risks, conductors, churches, employers, donors, and Black communities created support. Stills records reveal movement as strategy, aliases, family ties, roots, timing, and danger. Compare this improvised, criminalized network with a scheduled transit system below. Both depend on information and trust, but only one was designed to deny freedom. Philadelphia's abolitionist history must also be read alongside Northern commerce and racism. This marker is not a simple patriotic object. It is an invitation to recover the people whose choices made freedom possible. As you approach, keep the route moving. William Still marker is coming up on the SEPTA Broad Street Line. Father of the Underground Railroad, the Divine Lorraine Hotel was built in 1894 and became famous under Father Divine, whose International Peace Mission movement operated it as an integrated religious and communal institution. The route calls it the nation's first racially integrated hotel, present that cautiously because earlier examples and definitions vary. The building's significance lies in its deliberate challenge to segregation. It offered lodging, meals, employment, and shared public space through a movement that imagined a different social order. A hotel is infrastructure, rooms, kitchens, dining tables, staff, finances, rules, and relationships. Integration becomes real through those systems, not through a slogan on a facade. The building's later decline and redevelopment show that preservation requires viable use and investment. Connect it to the Broad Street Line as a place of movement. Travelers and neighbors could encounter a Black-led institution that refused the racial geography around it. As you approach, keep the route moving. Divine Lorraine Hotel is coming up on the SEPTA Broad Street Line. Nation's first racially integrated hotel, First African Baptist Church on Christian Street belongs to Philadelphia's history of independent Black congregations, abolitionist organizing, and neighborhood professional life. The route also connects it to Christian Street's Black Doctors Row, where medical professionals served patients facing discrimination in white institutions. A Black church could provide worship, literacy, burial support, aid to migrants, public speaking, political meetings, and a trusted address for people navigating a hostile city. The sanctuary had to hold worship, choir practice, funerals, visiting speakers, and community decisions. Connect this stop to William Still. Abolition was not only a secret journey north. It was also the daily construction of institutions where Black people could organize, heal, teach, and claim civic authority. As you approach, keep the route moving. First African Baptist Church is coming up on the SEPTA Broad Street Line. Key abolition site, Marian Anderson's Philadelphia home brings a global career back to domestic scale. Anderson was born in South Philadelphia in 1897, trained through church and neighborhood networks, and became one of the 20th century's great contraltos. Her 1939 concert at the Lincoln Memorial, after the Daughters of the American Revolution refused her use of Constitution Hall, became a defining civil rights moment. But the famous image rests on years of practice, teachers, fundraising, travel, family support, and professional discipline. A house holds the routines that public monuments leave out: rehearsal, correspondence, meals, visitors, clothing, and the quiet work of preparing a voice. Anderson's career also reveals how individual achievement could not by itself dissolve segregation. She performed on international stages while confronting exclusion at home, and her dignity was often demanded as evidence that institutions should change. Listen for agency rather than a simple triumph story. Anderson made strategic choices and used public visibility to challenge rules that treated Black artists as exceptions. The Broad Street Line links this address to churches, businesses, artists, and audiences that formed Philadelphia's Black cultural world. Cecil B. Moore was a Philadelphia lawyer, NAACP leader, labor organizer, and civil rights activist whose campaigns challenged discrimination in employment, housing, education, and public institutions. A mural and an avenue bearing his name turn political memory into everyday geography. Moore's activism happened through pickets, legal briefs, negotiations, voter registration, and the willingness to return after officials said no. He could be confrontational because the barriers were real. Read the mural as a starting point, then ask what work remains outside the image: who organized, paid the rent, kept records, and protected neighbors. Transit corridors concentrate attention, making a leader unavoidable to commuters. But a name is not the whole history. It must lead us back to the local campaigns and ordinary people who made civil rights pressure effective. As you approach, keep the route moving. Ahead is the Cecil B. Moore stop, where the route turns toward political image and Black public leadership. Even when the exact mural wall shifts or needs later confirmation, the area itself carries Moore's name as civic memory. That means the stop can still ask how activism becomes geography, and how a leader's legacy gets written into the everyday map. The Burke Street stop represents a neighborhood arts ecology rather than one surviving building. The route identifies the area with Black poets and painters in the 1950s, a period when North Philadelphia supported creative networks through homes, schools, churches, clubs, newspapers, and informal gathering places. Art near transit reaches people who did not plan to visit a museum. It catches commuters, turns a wall or storefront into an encounter, and helps a district feel like more than a pass-through. Be cautious about attaching a single artist or venue without an archival source. The stronger claim is about infrastructure. Creative work needs rooms, audiences, teachers, printers, buyers, and places to circulate. The Broad Street Line connects those networks across neighborhoods. Ask what survives when a studio closes. Often it is a name, a remembered performance, a mural, or an influence carried by students. As you approach, keep the route moving. Ahead is the Berks Arts District stop, where the route acknowledges that Black corridor history is not only institutional or commercial. It is also creative. Transit lines help art circulate by putting walls, venues, and neighborhoods into everyday contact with one another. Berks gives the route that visual and experimental energy. The Susquehanna-Dauphin area is best read as a district story, a Black urban world dense with housing, commerce, churches, entertainment, political organizing, and daily movement. The term Black metropolis does not mean a separate city in a literal sense. It names the concentration of institutions that allowed residents to build social life within a city shaped by segregation and uneven investment. Look at the corridor rather than searching for one monumental proof. Storefronts, porches, schools, newspapers, barbershops, clubs, and transit stops all formed a connected civic ecology. The Broad Street Line carried workers to jobs and customers to businesses, but it also carried news, music, family visits, and political energy. District histories are vulnerable because redevelopment can erase the physical evidence while leaving residents' memories disconnected from the map. Ask which blocks were once destinations, not merely places people passed through. As you approach, keep the route moving. Ahead is the North Philly Black Metropolis stop, where the route expands from a single corner into a whole urban field. This part of the corridor represents density, ambition, and the feeling of Black city life at scale. The term metropolis matters because it names not just residents, but institutions, commerce, politics, music, and movement all stacked together. The Lehigh Avenue stop turns the route toward industrial labor. Factories in North Philadelphia employed Black workers who faced dangerous conditions, unequal promotion, discriminatory hiring, and pressure to remain unorganized. Unionization was not automatic. Workers had to build trust across shifts, neighborhoods, and sometimes racial divisions. Read the industrial corridor as a workplace geography. Rail lines, warehouses, loading docks, and transit made production possible, while workers' bodies supplied the skill and endurance that corporate histories often leave unnamed. The Broad Street Line connected laborers to shifts and helped organize the city around work time. A labor history should ask who controlled the plant, who controlled the union, and whose demands changed wages and safety. Black workers were not only a labor supply. They were organizers, veterans, technicians, parents, and political actors who shaped Philadelphia's industrial life. As you approach, keep the route moving. Lehigh Black Labor Sites is coming up on the SEPTA Broad Street Line. Factories where black workers unionized. Erie Avenue's cultural corridor evokes the clubs, musicians, churches, and neighborhood venues that made North Philadelphia part of the city's jazz geography. The route connects the area to 1940s nightlife and to John Coltrane's Philadelphia years, but exact venue histories should be verified rather than assigned by atmosphere alone. Jazz travels through networks. Musicians need rehearsal rooms, club owners, audiences, instruments, transportation, and late-night food. Transit mattered because players and listeners had to move between neighborhoods and performances. Coltrane's development also reminds us that a musical genius emerges from teachers, bands, churches, records, and local scenes. A corridor can be culturally important even when its venues disappear. Listen for the difference between a surviving building and a surviving influence. The sound may be gone from the block, but the techniques, memories, and careers it helped form continue elsewhere. As you approach, keep the route moving. Erie Avenue Cultural Corridor is coming up on the SEPTA Broad Street Line. 1940s jazz clubs, Coltrane influence. Hunting Park is a transit-centered neighborhood story. Stations gather routines, school commutes, church clothes on Sundays, late shifts, errands, recreation, and chance meetings. The route associates this area with early black mutual aid societies, organizations that helped members face illness, funerals, unemployment, migration, and discrimination when public systems offered little protection. Mutual aid required dues, records, elected officers, trust, and repeated participation. Transit helped those organizations function by connecting members across a city. Read the station as a social room without walls. People wait, exchange news, and recognize one another before they ever arrive at the meeting place. The line is therefore part of community infrastructure, not merely a technical service. Ask what kinds of care become possible when people can move reliably, and what happens when fares, service cuts, or neighborhood disinvestment interrupt that movement. As you approach, keep the route moving. Ahead is Hunting Park, where the route turns toward public infrastructure in its most practical form. Transit, recreation, schools, and service corridors all overlap here. The line matters because it connected people to work, shopping, schools, and one another, helping black neighborhood life move across the city with rhythm and repetition. The Wyoming Avenue Business District represents the economic side of black neighborhood history. The route identifies a 1920s corridor of black entrepreneurs, but individual storefronts and dates should be verified through city directories, newspapers, photographs, and oral histories. The larger pattern is clear: businesses depend on movement. Transit delivers attention as much as it delivers bodies. A station brings potential customers, workers, deliveries, and information into a corridor, while a storefront gives that movement a destination. Black entrepreneurs built barber shops, restaurants, groceries, repair services, professional offices, and entertainment venues despite discrimination in lending, leasing, and commercial ownership. Their businesses were often family enterprises and informal community institutions at the same time. Look at the street edge and ask what has changed: building use, signage, vacancy, traffic, and who can afford to operate here. Neighborhood commerce is not a backdrop to history. It is one of the ways residents make a place legible and self-sustaining. As you approach, keep the route moving. Ahead is the Wyoming Avenue Business District stop, where the route focuses on commerce. Black neighborhood history is also a story of stores, services, and local economies that rose and adapted alongside transit access. A station stop like this is not just a platform. It is an artery for business visibility and customer flow. The ACES Museum stop centers Black military service and the artifacts that preserve it. Black Philadelphians served in segregated units during World War II while confronting discrimination at home and inside the armed forces. Uniforms, photographs, letters, medals, newspapers, and personal objects can show a life that official battle narratives often flatten into statistics. Ask what an artifact proves and what it cannot. A uniform can show service, but family stories may reveal the labor, fear, pride, and disappointment surrounding that service. Veterans returned to a country that had asked them to defend democracy while denying equal citizenship. Many became organizers, workers, educators, and community leaders. A museum gives those lives a durable address, but preservation depends on families donating materials, curators identifying names, and visitors treating the collection as more than patriotic decoration. Connect this stop to the transit line. Veterans travel through the same city as workers, students, and neighbors, carrying memories between home, employment, and public institutions. As you approach, keep the route moving. ACE's Museum Black World War II Veterans is coming up on the SEPTA Broad Street Line. Philly's Black Troops artifacts. Olney's Black history markers remind us that memory is often distributed across ordinary street corners. A plaque can identify a person or event, but storefronts, churches, schools, homes, and transit routines carry much more history than any one marker can hold. The route associates this area with plaques honoring Black World War II veterans. Read those names as an opening, not a complete archive. Ask who placed the marker, whose records were consulted, and which veterans or families remain unrepresented. Olney's location also shows how Black Philadelphia extended beyond a single center city core. Neighborhoods grew through migration, employment, family movement, religious institutions, and business, while transit connected them to the rest of the city. A marker becomes powerful when people encounter it repeatedly, on the way to work or a neighbor's house. It turns local memory into public geography. As you approach, keep the route moving. Ahead is the Olney stop, where the route begins by treating the Broad Street Line not just as transit, but as a map of neighborhood memory. Intersections like this carry more than traffic. They hold storefront histories, family movement, and the everyday record of who made North Philadelphia livable and legible to itself. The Rockland stop names a cluster of affiliated Black churches rather than one sanctuary. Church geography matters because congregations organize time and obligation across blocks. Services, choirs, weddings, funerals, youth programs, food drives, announcements, and mutual aid create a shared calendar that can outlast changes in businesses or housing. Institutions also carry a national history rooted in Black religious independence, beginning with Richard Allen's Philadelphia congregation and the founding of the African Methodist Episcopal Church in 1816. Do not assume every church in a cluster has the same history. Read each congregation's own records, leadership, and neighborhood relationships. The Broad Street Line connects worshippers to one another and to the city's larger network of work, education, and commerce. A church is therefore both a sacred building and a social technology. It gathers people, distributes information, trains leaders, and provides care. As you approach, keep the route moving. Ahead is the Rockland Church's stop, where the route shifts from business and activism to sacred neighborhood structure. Black churches along and near transit corridors often did far more than hold services. They organized care, announcements, rehearsals, aid, and community accountability. This stop names that network rather than a single sanctuary.